Andor Season 2 has hit us hard with these 3 episodes, so let's get straight into it. We'll start with episode 7, and again, a year has passed and we are now 2 years away from the Battle of Yavin. And so at this point, you can kind of see every 3 episode cycle has started a countdown, with the last 3 episodes likely putting us a year within the events of A New Hope. We start off on Yavin 4, where we see the beginnings of the Rebel base, and already it's a very different look than what we got all the way back in episode 2. We see X-Wings and Y-Wings, and in the background you can also see some deforestation going on as the Rebels clear more space. Wilmon gets off the transport ship, and we even get to see the original iconic Rebel outfit in the background as well. We find Cassian and Biggs in the forest, and it appears that Cassian has picked up a serious blaster burn injury in between episodes 6 and 7. Wilmon interrupts the two of them, and it's clear that they haven't seen each other for some time, potentially since Wilmon was with Saw Gerrera. We also learn that Luthen and Cassian haven't spoken to each other since the argument on Coruscant, and the animosity is real. Wilmon asks if they really trust the Rebel alliance that they're hanging out with, and much of this really sounds like Luthen and Saw's opinions being spoken through Wilmon's mouth. There is also a difference in philosophy, as guys like Luthen still prefer to do things under the cover of darkness, while Cassian, having had enough of that life, realizes that he wants to do things out in the open. This is actually a theme that is discussed through these few episodes and actually adds a whole lot of color and meaning to when he says this in Rogue One.
Well done terrible things on behalf of the rebellion. Everything I did for the rebellion.
Back on Gorman, we see in the background black smoke rising and reporters feeding Imperial propaganda to the HoloNet. We learn that there has been an increase in rebel activity, most recently in Koray and Jalnovi, both of which are entirely new planets, but if these episodes are anything to go by, it wouldn't be surprising if those were orchestrated by the Empire as well. We see Cyril walk through the town square, and this time we see that it is heavily patrolled and guarded by Imperials, whereas previously there would have been daily demonstrations as we saw in earlier episodes. Wilmon tells Cassian that he has been on Gorman all this time, and Cassian gets angry, talking about how Luthen has wanted to see Gorman burn for the longest time, something which Luthen explicitly says in the previous episode.
It will burn very brightly.
We learn that Luthen wants Cassian to assassinate Dedra Meero, as Luthen is concerned that she is getting too close to them. Pendergast talks to Dedra, letting her know of the Emperor's interest and that Krennic's scientists on Iadu haven't been able to conjure up an alternative. Iadu is a planet that first appeared in Rogue One and hosts the Iadu Energy Conversion Laboratory, the very same that Galen Erso, architect of the Death Star, was working at. It is also the location that the Death Star superlaser was constructed on. The laboratory, as we see later, would be blown up by the Rebel Alliance on the orders of General Draven, someone who also appears in the show later on. Dedra is informed that the original plan is a go-ahead and that Captain Kaido will be sent to help oversee the military action part of the operation. Taking a look at the captain's face, you can see a scar alongside the left-hand side, indicating that this is a man who has seen combat before. Pendergast also tells Dedra to calm her nerves, telling her to let the image of professional ascendance settle your nerves. In other words, think more about the promise of promotion, which is such a cold, bureaucratic way of treating what will soon amount to be the destruction of an entire planet. Cyril gets a hold of Dedra and is a little frustrated that he is not being told what is going on, and starts to suspect that the bombing at the depot isn't what it appears to be, which leads him to question his real purpose on Gorman. She tells Cyril to go home, pack, and be ready to leave, and when they get back to Coruscant, they will be rewarded, echoing what Pendergast told her to do. Dedra tries to distract Cyril by giving him a very awkward and forceful kiss, again speaking to just how socially awkward and weird Dedra is, like something is missing in how she functions. We see Mon thank Chloris, her driver, someone who we also saw back in Season 1 when he was already under suspicion for being an ISB spy. As Mon walks into the Senate, they meet Senator Oren, the representative of Gorman, who really just thanks her for all that she has done, letting us know that he thinks Gorman is basically done for. Back on Gorman, we see the Gorman front arguing about about what they should do next, and we hear how Rylance is really trying to get them to pivot back to peaceful protest, something which the younger members are not in favor of. We also see a new member of the group, the bellhop boy that Cassian spoke to in episode 5. We also see this dude who has joined them as well, and an interesting detail is how the Gormans refer to themselves as Gore, just a tiny little detail separating the difference between how outsiders refer to them and them to themselves. Back on Yavin, Biggs takes Cassian to a Force healer, but don't expect her to be a Jedi or someone of Jedi lineage, as there were plenty of Force-based faiths in the galaxy. We hear about how Marva hated Force healers, which is also why Cassian doesn't like them. His skepticism about the Force is also something that we see in Rogue One as well, especially in the way he treats Blaz and Shirut. The healer senses Cassian, and she senses that Cassian is gathering strength of spirit and that he is also a messenger. The first point is really just her saying that the Force is strong with him, implying that there is a greater destiny in store for him, and the second point foreshadows his importance in the events of Rogue One, delivering the message about the Death Star as well as the Death Star plans. You could also see this as Cassian's next important mission, which is to deliver Mon Mothma to the Rebellion and her message to the Rebel Alliance, but more on that later. Cyril tries to bargain with Enza of the Gorman front as a means to de-escalate the situation by laying blame on outsiders, which is really just him trying to make up for his role in turning things sour on Gorman. Enza slaps him, letting us know that the Gormans know that he was a double agent all along. Cassian's arm is healed, which surprises him, and he also tells Biggs not to tell people about what he does, which has a double meaning. On one hand, it refers to the importance of keeping his work secret as a means of safety, while on the other hand, you get the sense that there is an element of shame, of the dark things that he has done in the past to get the rebellion to where it is today. Another point to note is that Biggs really embraces the Force a lot faster than Cassian, which could indicate that she is somewhat Force sensitive, as she mentions that her dreams being similar to that of the Force healer's proclamations. And if you look and pay really close attention, you will see that this moment is actually the real beginning of Cassian's hero's journey. This moment and the next 2 episodes is ironically a cyclical cycle where Cassian has to embrace this new role of his. There are a lot of similarities here compared to season 1, where he was also equally reluctant to take on this fight, and while the reasons then were out of fear, this time his reluctance stems from how tired he is from the fight, which is completely understandable, as by this point he has been fighting non-stop for 4 years. It's also worth mentioning that as part of every hero's journey, there is a transformation, an ordeal the hero emerges from, change from his experience. And I think this is something that we won't get to see in this show, as this was part of the journey that he already went on or will go on in Rogue One, finding faith and hope through Jyn once again. We see General Dravitz Draven make his first appearance in the show, who, of course, also appeared in Rogue One as the Rebel Spy Master. We see Cassian and Wilmon load up their transport, the very same transport that he uses in Rogue One as well. Draven mentions that Cassian can't just come and go as he likes. Cassian says that the day he needs permission is the day that he will be gone, letting us know that while he is in this fight against the Empire, he isn't quite committed to the Rebel Alliance, something which will likely change by the end of this show. But again, his reluctance echoes back to the idea that this is Cassian embarking on another hero's journey. On Gorman, we see a squad of young troopers arrive, and we can see how green they are when some of them almost forget to put their caps on, which, as we learn later, is all part of the Imperial plan. Cassian pulls into Gorman, and we see how nervous Wilmon is compared to him, demonstrating this difference in experience between the two, with Cassian being the veteran. It's actually kind of funny to watch, as not too long ago, Wilmon was acting pretty tough. Biggs and Vel reconnect, and we learn that since Cinta's death, Vel took a step away to train new recruits, taking a break from all the espionage, and we also hear that Vel is here to talk to her on orders from Draven and Dodonna. We've already seen Draven, but Dodonna should also ring a bell, as Dodonna was one of the greatest rebellion generals, and one who appeared several times across the franchise. We first see him in A New Hope, so this guy is really one of the OGs. At this point in time, we know that Dodonna is running his own rebel cell, as we see in Star Wars Rebels. We hear Vel talk about how the Rebel Alliance needs Cassian to be a leader and less reckless, echoing an earlier theme introduced by Luthen.
Think like a leader.
Cassian checks into the hotel, this time under a different identity, and he ends up meeting the same bellboy who is now working in the front desk. But since he is part of the front, he's going to help cover Cassian. Also notice how since Cassian arrived, there are significantly less aliens compared to his previous visit. Besides the hotel area, we don't really see aliens anywhere else, just another sign of the Empire's xenophobic influence. We hear one of the receptionists say that the shuttle from Alderaan has been cancelled. Now Alderaan is of course the home world of Leia and Bail Organa, and much like Gorman, it will also be destroyed by the Empire. In his room, Cassian unveils his weapon, and I have to say this false bottom case trope very much has a Cold War feeling to it. On to episode 8, and things kick off fast as the Empire decides to open up the square and barricade HQ as a means to bait a Gorman protest. We learn that Dedra is agitated by Kaido and Krennic's mining equipment has already landed on the planet, both of which surprises Dedra. We also see Cyril's mother watching the holonews, and already we see that the news cycle is preparing the general public for what is to come, essentially talking about how bad the Gormans are so that when things kick off, public favor will be on the Imperial side. It's a very important perspective that the show provides as it demonstrates not only a mother's worry, but also that all eyes are on Gorman. Cyril is informed that all Imperial employees are to gather at the HQ. And as the Gormans gather, we see that Rylance has finally put it all together. He finally realizes that this is all a trap. An interesting visual detail here is that the Gormans have been designed to look very much like the French revolutionaries during the French Revolution, carrying flags and marching through the streets. Rylance challenges Cyril and forces Cyril to confront the reality that he really has no idea what he's done. That what he thought was a ruse to trap the likes of Luthen, when in reality, he has aided in the Imperial invasion and pillage of Gorman. There is this moment where Rylance asks Cyril, "What sort of being are you?" questioning Cyril's humanity, which is really hitting home. We get a tense moment between Dedra and Kaido over the ownership of the operation, which hints at a wider bureaucratic disdain for each other, as Dedra is ISB while Kaido is under the Imperial Army, two different branches. Cassian checks out and he tells the receptionist that he hopes things work out, and the receptionists say rebellions are built on hope, a line so iconic and sentiment echoed by none other than Jyn herself in Rogue One.
You're asking us to invade an Imperial installation based on nothing but hope.
Rebellions are built on hope.
I mean, this was just honestly the cherry on top, as you can feel that the show was really trying to create these ties with the movies to link it all back in. And the fact that Cassian hears this here for the first time and then later when Jyn does it, adds a whole lot more when it comes to giving Cassian the impetus to defy orders and take the team to Scarif. Cassian tries to figure out what to do, and there's this moment where he turns away, just in time as Cyril walks past him, and that was a moment that really got me out of my seat for a second. By this point, I think we all know what is going to happen, and it really becomes a question of when and not if. So there is this sinking dread as you realize what we are approaching, and the anticipation is killing me at this point. Another great detail that makes the anticipation great is that we constantly hear these fighters buzzing overhead, and as the tension ramps up, we see and hear more and more of them in the sky. There is this sense of pressure coming from above that makes this whole moment even more tense. Cyril makes his way to the HQ and he overhears a reporter spewing lies about the situation, which really shocks him. The weight of the moment really all sinks in when we see the KX series security droid on standby waiting for him. Now, these KX series security droids are no joke, as we have seen in Rogue One.
Freeze! Right there! You're right. I should just wait on the ship.
It's also worth noting that the KX units also took part in the destruction of Mandalore, so these guys are no joke and definitely overkill for a situation such as Gorman. The stormtroopers seal off the square and the Empire begins to box in the Gormans, effectively creating a pressure cooker. The crowd is essentially boxed in from all sides, including from above, creating the perfect kill zone. We then hear Kaido give orders for the patrol of young troopers to go into the crowd under the pretext of keeping the lane clear, and this is really a whole lot of nonsense. What Kaido is doing, or knows he's doing, is that because it's a young patrol, the chances of panic increases when things go wrong, creating the perfect opportunity to begin the Gorman massacre. There's actually a small little funny detail here when we see one of the soldiers put on their helmet, push up their visor, only for it to slide down once again. I guess Imperial equipment isn't that great after all. As the situation escalates, we hear the Gormans begin to sing their own anthem. It's a real tear-jerking scene because this is really the Gormans singing their anthem for the last time, one last song before the funeral. Cyril manages to get a hold of Dedra and demands an explanation, and this time he is not playing around. This is also the first time we see Cyril get really violent with Dedra, and it's one of the few times we actually see her lose control. And it's in these moments that she strangely appears to be more human, more so than her usual self. Cyril finally sees Dedra for who she really is and decides to walk away, and as the audience, you can't help but question whether you should feel sorry for him or not. Cyril leaves the building and things kick off outside as the trooper draws the anger of the crowd. Dedra prepares to give the order, and if you look at her eyes, watch how dilated they are, indicating how stressful the situation is, and it's just insane how it's only in situations like this that we see Dedra and her most human self. Dedra gives the go-ahead, trying her best to look tough. It all goes to hell when we see an Imperial sniper take aim and shoot at one of the troopers, creating a cascade of events, and the massacre begins. A firefight breaks out, and what's worse is that even after it all kicks off, we see the snipers continuing to shoot at civilians, which is just deep evil stuff. There is also this moment where we get to see Kaido's reaction to the whole thing, and the guy just smirks. One by one, the Gorman rebels get shot down, and the Imperials decide to roll out the KX units, and it is absolutely terrifying what these guys can do. I mean, you can just sense the horror and desperation as these guys fling people around and blasters don't do anything. It's also interesting to see how this portrayal of KX units as these terrifying forces of evil differs completely to the comedic portrayal in Rogue One.
Congratulations. You are being rescued. Congratulations.
Through all this, we see Cyril soak it all up, and just as Cassian is about to take the shot, Cyril spots him and just zones in. This Cyril and Cassian rematch is something that I think a lot of us have been waiting for since season 1, but given the situation it is set in, it's actually a lot more visceral than I thought it would be. But really, the cherry on top out of all of this is when Cyril is finally able to finish his ultimate goal and Cassian just doesn't even recognize him. And I was kinda laughing tragically at the situation, as for years Cyril has been obsessing about Cassian, and to now finally have him in sight and for Cassian to not even recognize him is just irony at its best. In a way, you can see this as comeuppance and illustrative of Cyril's life, one big joke. In reality, Cyril is really just a small man playing pretend, and when the reality of his work turned around to bite him, he just couldn't handle it, and now he's dead. Another point to note is that the fact that Cassian doesn't even recognize him isn't all that surprising, considering that they only interacted once throughout the entire show, and that was when Cassian incapacitated him. Ryland saves Cassian, and as they try to make their escape, we see a KX following them only to be saved by the man who killed Cinta. So hey, redemption I guess. Now this is obviously the origin story for how K2SO and Cassian meet, a dynamic duo that we get to see more of in Rogue One, although interestingly enough, this isn't the original canon story of how they met. In fact, in the comics, the two of them meet under very different circumstances, with Cassian rewiring him on the spot as he attempted to escape Imperial detection on an entirely different mission. So I guess that's not canon anymore, as everything on screen takes priority over the other mediums. And we hear Dina over the radio calling for help, telling anyone who would listen about what the Empire is doing on Gorman. We also learn that thousands are dead, which dwarfs the Tarkin massacre many times over. Dina also talks about the need to tell the truth, and this last radio call from Gorman actually reminded me of a similar instance in World War II when Athens fell to the Nazis, which also covered very similar themes of the importance of the truth.
Έλληνες, ψηλά τις καρδιές, προσοχή, ο ραδιοφωνικός σταθμός Αθηνών Ύστερα από λίγο δεν θα είναι ελληνικός, θα είναι γερμανικός και θα μεταδίδει ψέματα. Έλληνες, μην τον ακούτε.
It is such an emotional scene and an amazing payoff to all the suspense built in the episodes before. We also get this really powerful scene with Dedra as she grieves over Cyril's death, and it's a strange moment as it demonstrates that she is still human at heart. And you can also see how she is trying to regain her composure by readjusting her uniform, trying to preserve the sense of professionalism. It's also worth mentioning that in the moment of her greatest triumph on the show, she is also experiencing her greatest sorrow, which is just peak irony. We also see Cyril's mom crying, and at the end of the day, as the Empire wins a big victory, it is at everyone's expense, regardless of which side you are on. On to episode 9, and just when you think things can't escalate any further, oh boy, buckle up. We begin at the Senate, which is in panic as people realize what has just happened on Gorman. We see the Gorman senator being taken away. The senator pleads for help, asking anyone to help him, which no one does. Senator Oran also proclaims that it's my people today and yours tomorrow. This will be you soon enough, echoing a very famous poem titled First They Came by Pastor Martin Niemöller. Bail and Mon talk about what to do next, and she convinces Bail to work his magic to give her the opportunity to speak on the Senate floor. The plan being that once she condemns the Empire, she'll make an escape. Bail refuses to leave on the basis that the Rebel Alliance isn't ready yet and that he needs to stay to stall the Empire. But he also acknowledges that Yavin needs her leadership, all valid points. We hear Bail say that Senator Ton found a listening device in his office, letting us know that the Empire is slowly closing in on all levels of society. We see Cassian on Coruscant and we see him unsheath a dagger, which is actually from Luthen's walking stick, and the twisted form of knife is perhaps symbolizing just how twisted Luthen has become over the years fighting against the Empire from the shadows. Cassian uses his journalist cover and has been tasked with getting Mon out of the Senate. Cassian tells Clea that he is done after this, signaling that he wants to quit from the fight. He talks about how he needs to start making his own decisions, and while quitting may appear to be his own decision, you can also argue that it's actually the Empire that is making him do that. The constant fight, battle, and death Cassian has to deal with is pushing him out, which is exactly what the Empire would want. So is it really his own decision? I'm not too sure. Instead, choosing to fight, to endure, to stay on, to resist, that, I would argue, is an individual decision born from the desire to be free. Erskine finds a listening device in Mon's office, and this tips off the ISB technicians that something is wrong. Erskine tells her to go to the plaza to practice her upcoming speech, and we see Luthen meeting her there. We learn that Erskine has been working for Luthen since the wedding ceremony, which confirms the suspicion that Luthen was vetting him in that particular scene. And we also learn that Bail's team has been compromised. And the reason why Luthen knows this is the case is because the agent that infiltrated Bail's team belongs to Supervisor Young, Luthen's mole. Mon professes that she is afraid of Luthen, as she is afraid of what he is capable of, reminding him of what he did to Tay Kolma. And central to this particular conversation is the idea that while Luthen wants the rebellion to succeed, his way of doing things doesn't really help build trust between allies, which is why it always makes it so difficult to coordinate anything on a larger scale using his methods. Another interesting detail here is that unlike his usual outings, Luthen isn't wearing his wig, which lets us know that he means serious business. We then see Supervisor Largret monitoring comms, and Mon fires Erskine. We see Luthen reconnect with Cassian, and we get an interesting tidbit of dialogue where Luthen reminisces about how Cassian appeared when he needed him most, at Aldhani, Narkino, Ferrix, Minarao, and Gorman, and now even here on Coruscant, alluding to the fact that there are forces beyond their comprehension at work. What the show is trying to do here, and earlier with Biggs, is to reintroduce the Force as an element that has always been there throughout the show, connecting it with the main themes of Rogue One and the original trilogy. It's a very clever way of reintroducing familiar ideas to us and tying the story to the wider Star Wars fabric. We see Bail's team infiltrate the Senate, and Cassian does the same. Bail and Mon meet just before her speech, and Bail tells her to
tear the shit out of this place,
which is kinda cool. We cut to the Senate floor where we see senator after senator feeding into the Imperial narrative, giving the illusion of free speech. And if you pause to take a look at the Senate floor, notice that the majority of the senators are not even present, and you can tell this by the number of lights that are turned off. Considering that a terrible tragedy has just occurred, you would expect all this to be turned on, but as we see, the Senate is really just beyond caring. We also get to see Senator Den Uene of the planet Runa speaking, which is interesting because prior to this, the planet Runa was represented by Senator Aang, someone who was sympathetic to Padme's work during the Clone Wars, which lets us know that certain senators have been replaced with those more favorable to the imperial temperature. We also get to hear this one senator say that they too lost a citizen to the Gormans, and I do wonder if this is in reference to Cyril, as it would appear that he was a civilian who was shot. If that is the case, then this would make this senator the senator of Coruscant, Cyril's home world. We hear a Senator Irvine representing the planet Hodi yield her floor to Senator Bail Organa, who then invokes Article 17252 in order to yield the floor to Mon uninterrupted. It's a nice little way to demonstrate Bail's prowess in the political field. He even uses the words of other pro-imperial senators to justify his reasoning, which is rather clever. As Mon's speech begins, the anticipation is palpable. The speech rolls on and the Empire tries to shut it down, but there's a little hiccup as they can't get through a locked door. We get this acting dumb moment from the technicians, which buys them enough time for Mon's speech, and you have to wonder if this was part of the plan, or whether this was a spontaneous form of rebellion from these two. And Mon delivers arguably one of the most passionate speeches in Star Wars about the importance of truth and speaking the truth, a message that I think is more important in our world today, perhaps more than ever. And I absolutely love the part where she just straight up calls Palpatine a monster. There are no fancy words or descriptions for the man, just a simple monster. And I think this is perhaps what hits the hardest in this entire speech, as throughout the entire show, every time characters mention Palpatine, it's always in reverence, disguised in titles or whispers, but for the first time, when someone finally speaks the truth, he is called what he truly has been all this time: a monster. The ISB shut the broadcast, but it's too late as Mon finishes her speech and the extraction process begins. The next few moments are an absolute adrenaline rush. The ISB mole gets killed, and Mon gets a very thorough introduction to the life of a rebel. We even hear Cassian say, "Welcome to the rebellion." Another thing worth noting is that the Senate guards are all dressed in a sort of royal blue, which is quite in line with how they used to dress in the Clone Wars. Corvus the driver gets shot and they manage to get to the safe house. Back at the ISB control room, we hear that Colonel Yularen wants to speak with Largret, and you know this guy is about to lose his job. On Yavin, we see Vel induct a new group of rebels, and she stops at a specific blaster which, as it turns out, belongs to Melshi, the friend Cassian made on Narkina 5, and this particular blaster is the same one Cassian gave him. It's also worth pointing out that Melshi actually first appeared in Rogue One, so it's very nice to see him back in the show. At the safe house, the whole gang is there as we see Wilmon and Drina, and we learn that Cassian won't be the one to bring her to Yavin. Instead, the plan is to have her be brought in by a Yavin escort. This actually refers to Gold Squadron, who would work alongside Phoenix Squadron to get the job done. Clea remarks about how they just want to rewrite the story, and considering that they did most of the hard work, it's kinda understandable. They also mention that they need Mon to give a speech, something which we also get to see in the Rebels show, a speech titled The Declaration of the Rebellion. Although, to be fair, the final escort to Yavin isn't without its own hiccups either. The point is, at the end of the day, it's all about the optics, although this does add a whole other layer to when we see Mon in the Rebels show giving that very speech. Mon asks about how she can thank Cassian, and all Cassian can say is make it worth it. It's such a simple answer, but the heaviest demand Cassian could probably ask for. This interaction also adds a whole lot more to when Mon introduces Cassian to Jin in Rogue One.
Captain Cassian Andor, Rebel Intelligence.
Cassian lands on Yavin and he meets up with Biggs, telling her that he is done. But during the night, Biggs decides to leave, realizing that the rebellion needs Cassian, and that her being around is only stopping him from that mission. Biggs ultimately realizes that her being there is holding him back, as her presence gives him an option to leave, and so she decides to leave the rebellion, giving Cassian the only option to stay. Biggs says that once the war is over, they can be together again and do the things they've missed, which is so heartbreaking, as not only does it lean into the weight of this personal sacrifice, but also the tragic fact that this will never happen, as Cassian never makes it off Scarif. Towards the end, we hear a rebel call Cassian Captain Andor, confirming his position of leadership in the rebellion. We see K2SO come online, voiced by the one and only Alan Tudyk, and wow, I have to say these 3 episodes of Andor are arguably the best trio in the entire series, and dare I say, better than the Narkina 5 episodes. And I honestly can't see how the next 3 episodes could possibly top this. From the tension to the emotional beats, episodes 7, 8, 9 delivered Star Wars on a whole different level. There is honestly so much to say, and I don't think I can sing enough praises for this show. What I will say is that after these few episodes, I'm definitely rewatching Season 3 Episode 18 of Star Wars Rebels just to get that nice finishing touch about what happens to Mon Mothma after this extraction episode. That's all for this breakdown. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte.
And I have spoken.